ask you, where is Wilder standing after that defeat, the third time they met, Fury and him? Again, in terms of elite fighters, what's the perception of your guy? Is he right up there?
What I think of Deontay Wilder?
Yeah, with some of the very best.
I think in any era, Deontay Wilder would, if he wouldn't have reigned supreme, his presence would have been felt by, and I'm talking about Ali's, Foreman, everybody. I believe he would have been a force to be reckoned with during any era. I believe the same thing about Tyson Fury. I'm not that sure about too many of the other guys. Like I'm just not. I think Alexander Usyk also. Usyk to me is a lot better than he gets credit for. Yeah.
I want to ask you this: you fought. You're not coach, I'm training him. You fought Wilder. What's it like to be in the wrong end of his power?
It felt like I was on the wrong end of his power. And the real funny part about that is before I fought Deontay with 10 ounces on, I felt him with 20 ounces on. And when I felt him with 20 ounces on, before that, I left Tyson Fury's camp and basically flew to Deontay Wilder's camp, so I knew the difference of the power immediately. Because we'll say I was boxing Fury Tuesday, by next Tuesday I was in with Deontay. And his power with 20-ounce gloves on, it reminded me of just like a combined force of Lennox Lewis and Vladimir Klitschko's together, striking and thudding. It would be equivalent to Mike Tyson and George Foreman's power if you put it together. Tyson, to me, was very rapid. George was very imposing and thudding. And when you put that together, I think you have the blessing and the gifted power of Deontay Wilder.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, Tyson Fury gets up.
Absolutely. Now, that's a man's man. You got to give it to him. It's like, if you look at any of the build-ups, even though I felt Deontay would knock Fury out, and I still do if they fought a fourth time, right? But I always said Fury is special. I'm not one of these trainers just, I'm not detached from the reality of whatever it is, the opposition we're facing.
Yeah.
I think that's what gives you an advantage in this no bar. You have to know who you're facing. You have to be humble and have tons of humility, and you just take on whatever task get brought your way.
So, those are the words of Malik Scott as he states that Deontay Wilder would have not reigned supreme, but would have made his presence known in any era of the sport of boxing. And let me counterpunch. I think that Wilder, to me, would have just been another hard puncher. I don't think Wilder, let's say the 60s, okay? In the 60s, what time in the 60s? Okay, late 60s. Guys like Joe Frazier, George Foreman, Muhammad Ali, Ken Norton, Ron Lyle, Sonny Liston. Guys like that against Wilder. I think Wilder, he probably would have, he could have, should I say, not would have, stupid word to say in a fantasy fight, but could have maybe upset one of them. Or if he didn't upset them, he could have got a knockdown on one of them. I mean, the power is big. He could have, maybe someone like Joe Frazier, someone that moves forward and then he can time him, and maybe Ken Norton. But you have to take into account the dangers of fighting guys like that too, because guys like Joe Frazier and Ken Norton, they were considered regular size fighters at the time. Frazier wasn't all that damn tall, but he was still a heavyweight because he can hit you with a heavyweight. He had guys like George Foreman scared of him. Okay, so no, he was not no one to take lightly. I used to call my cousin Joe Frazier, Emmett Stroud III. Shout out to you. Right? Because he could hit so damn hard. And I look at the opposition. Wilder, someone like Ali, he wouldn't have lasted because, he didn't have the boxing ability. That's more than likely why he couldn't beat Tyson, because he didn't have the boxing ability. You know what I mean? Look, let's look at someone with a hard punch. A guy that probably hit the hardest that anybody ever seen was Ernie Shavers. Ernie Shavers was never a world champion. Ernie Shavers was, a a very durable, dangerous fighter in the 70s. And he was known for this horrific power. But those guys that he fought, they either weren't champions at the time, because every time he stepped up for the championship bout, he came up short. He was another pretty much like David Tua, and David Tua came up in a division at the time, bro. The pool of fighters were there: Lennox Lewis, Evander Holyfield, Michael Moore, which he knocked Michael Moore out, but Michael Moore wasn't champion when he fought him. Chris Bird, because he fought through the 2000s as well. Mike Tyson never fought him, but the point I'm trying to make here, you take Wilder in the 60s, 70s, even 80s. I don't see, timing would have to be there. Okay? Not saying that he couldn't whoop a champion, because a lot of people ended up ultimately knocking out guys that were former champions, but that doesn't make them champions. Luis Ortiz just stopped Charles Martin, but that doesn't mean he's a champion. He wasn't a champion at the time. Now, had he fought him while he was a champion, that's a different story. But people didn't want to really see Luis Ortiz. They ducked him like they did with a lot of Cuban fighters, okay? And I think with Wilder, I like the way Malik Scott, how he explained it. His force would have been dominant. Sure, you'd have knew who he was, but he wouldn't have been anywhere on the likes of the guys that we talk about back then. He wouldn't have been one of those dudes. He would have probably been maybe equivalent of maybe a Pretty Boy Floyd, maybe. But even Pretty Boy Floyd was a champion. Now, however, put him in the 50s. If you put him in the 50s against someone like Rocky Marciano, I see him knocking out someone like Rocky Marciano. Why? Because Rocky was not inclined stylistically and technically as a lot of these fighters. His wheel was he was durable. He got dropped by Ezra Charles and Archie Moore and guys like that, smaller heavyweights. Well, Wilder necessarily wasn't a huge dude. He was just a tall dude. But what did he have being tall? He had the reach. So since he had that reach, yeah, I see Wilder knocking out Rocky Marciano. Okay, I see him knocking him out simply because the style. Because Rocky, he was just kind of getting under there, and I seen Wilder just lining that shot up, let his ass loop, let him loop back. Down you go, Rocky, never to return. That 49-0 wouldn't be 49-0, it would probably be 48-1 if Wilder was there. Joe Louis in his prime, now you're going back to the 40s. Okay? See, then that's a whole nother different thing. That fight there, I don't see him handling Joe Louis in the inside. Because Joe Louis was an absolute beast on the inside. But he did leave his left down, just like Max Schmeling nailed. But and here's the thing about Wilder. Wilder is so one-track minded with the right hand, or he used to be rather, to the point where that might have been the case if he didn't get knocked out first. Because who's to say Joe Louis fighting Deontay Wilder would have been that one-sided? We know Wilder has a good right hand. If anything, and anybody knew anything about him, we knew he had a right hand, and you would probably know that in that same time frame. Okay, so fighting someone like Joe Louis, that might have been somebody for him to beat, But him being elite, maybe in the 50s, possibly in the 40s, and everything else before the 30s and the 20s and the 10s, belonged to other men, which, I'm not even going to go there because, let's do that. Why? Because I'm talking about other stuff that doesn't matter and apply to us today. But, like Rocky, like Manasseh Mahler, Jack Dempsey, guys like that. Jack Dempsey, and rules were different then too. So a lot of things you have to take into account. But anyway, you guys tell me what you think of Malik Scott rating Deontay Wilder within the greats of boxing's elite. Of course, please subscribe. And you guys been Counterpunch. Peace!